Hello, so in this video series we're going to learn a little bit about how to make old school games, starting with Super Mario Kart for the Super Nintendo here. So we're going to learn about things like, sprite billboarding, changing sprites to look 3D so that when, the player's angle to the object it's looking at changes, the sprite also changes to give it this sort of 3D look. We're going to learn about resizing sprites based on the distance of the player and generally creating a pseudo 3D world here, right? We're going to be taking a 2D track and projecting it in such a way. And I'll explain a little bit more about how we're doing this as we go along, but we're going to learn about all that kind of stuff and more. We also might go into some basic racing game mechanics. I don't think I'm going to probably make a full game menus and all in this video series. I'm more giving you the tools to make a game that looks like this, and you can do as much or as little as you want with it. Now, if these videos were to get some views or something and somebody asked for like a full game and wanted me to do the whole 9 yards with like, placings and all of that, sure, we could go through all of that and do it. But for now, I think the video series will just be about recreating this pseudo 3D style that was unique to the Super Nintendo, right? And by the way, this is what Nintendo calls graphical mode 7. So on the Super Nintendo, this type of projection would have been achieved through hardware rather than just pure coding because computers were just not that powerful then. But we're going to do everything through code. We're going to do these scrolling backgrounds, this projection. Hell, we can even do a mini map maybe later. We will see. So let's get started. We're going to be using Java and Libgdx. If you don't know what Libgdx is, it's a framework for making games in Java. It's actually built on top of the lightweight Java gaming library, but that's not really important. It's just an interesting tidbit. And we'll see a little bit more about that in a second. In any case, if you want to get Libgdx, all you have to do is go to their website, go to download, get their setup app, and you will be ready to go. I am going into this video series with the assumption that you know something about programming. You don't have to be an expert or a pro or anything like that. And this is the setup app, by the way. When you open it, you'll get this. But at least know that all the basics, like loops and arrays and variables and those things. And also, it would probably help if you knew a little bit about object-oriented programming, classes, and the like. You don't have to know a ton about that stuff, but you definitely want to know the basics for this video series to help you understand libgdx and how the library works and how we use it. In any case, when you get this setup app here, you're just going to have to generate a project. Now this will be really simple because we're going to uncheck all these third-party extensions. We don't need any of those. We're also going to uncheck HTML, iOS, and Android. We're just going to make a desktop app for this video series. We're not going to get too fancy with Android or anything. We could, and maybe eventually, but definitely not for the moment. This is just where you want it to go to. I have this folder on my desktop. This is what you want your main game class to be called. Karting game. Cool. Whoops, my karting game. So I'm not being very creative, and you can just do whatever you want. Also, whatever you want to call it, this is kind of irrelevant, and we could even change it later theoretically. But this is going to be the name of your project, your package, sort of structure there. And this is just a convention, the com, my whatever, my name usually, dot whatever game, and just hit generate. And this is going to take a second. There's no particular reason why we're using Java, by the way. It's just what I'm comfortable with and what I've done this before in. So yeah, this is all normal. Like I said, it just takes a second. It'll go into the folder there. You can already see the folder populating. All right, cool. So I'm going to be using Eclipse for this. I know some people do not like Eclipse. You do not have to use Eclipse. Any IDE that can hold a Gradle project would be fine. But if you are using Eclipse like I am, just go to import projects, existing Gradle projects, and just finish. And everything should import fine, I think. Okay, yeah, you'll get this project structure here. See the desktop portion. where your main class is. You just get a couple generated classes here, and then you get the main game class that you made. And we'll talk about this in just a second. Now, if we try to run it right now, it's not actually going to run, I believe. Yeah, it's going to crash. And the reason why is you have to go to run configurations and then arguments, and you have to make sure that your assets folder is linked to as your working directory, right? If you run it, you just get this default libgdx project, and we'll do more with this very soon. First off, we're not going to do much with the desktop launcher for now. You can see that it just makes a new instance of our game, launches it as a lightweight Java gaming library. Once again, libgdx is built on top of it. Application configuration there, and that's it with that for now. What we're going to look at today, though, is this sort of main class here, which is going to be the jumping off point for our game. First off, we're going to change this from application adapter to game. Going to have to import that. Now, what is game? Well, it's just sort of the main class libgdx uses that will be passed around to sort of our other classes in order to delegate to screens. Now, what do I mean by delegate to screens? Well, libgdx has this screen system where each screen represents like one page in the book of your game. It's sort of like a scene. So you can have like a main menu screen, and then like maybe a main gameplay screen or score screen. And each one of these screens is going to have like its own render loop, which is sort of the main game loop for libgdx. And then it's going to have like a show and a create function, dispose, that kind of stuff. And each of the screens is going to be just one part of your game, and you're going to decide what's go in that part. And it's actually pretty convenient. We'll talk about this, will become a little bit more obvious once we start actually making our screens. Which, before we fix up this class, let's go ahead and make our first screen. This is where a lot of the logic for this tutorial is going to go. This and one other thing we'll be making later. This does not need to extend game, it needs to extend screen adapter, because once again, this is going to represent a screen. Now, I believe you could just have it extend screen, but then we would get all kinds of, or implement screen, but then we'd get all kinds of mandatory methods, which we don't really want. Just make a public constructor for it. Whoops. Okay, and it's going to need game, because like I said, game is going to get passed around, and so is the Sprite Badge, actually, which I'll explain the Sprite Badge in just a moment. Import that, import all that good stuff, and like I said, this is going to have a public void render, whoops, carry brackets however you like it, float delta. I'll explain what float delta is in a moment. We're also going to have public void dispose, just like the other class did, and I'll explain dispose in just a second. Oh, that should be, you know, in Java you don't have to put the override, but it's usually considered good convention too. And we're also going to have public void show. And show is kind of what runs before the first render loop. It's going to be very useful. It runs after the class has been created, but before the first render loop. And this is all just boilerplate stuff in Java, you know, private game. One of the reasons why people don't like Java so much sometimes. So script batch, that's not what I want. It's because you have a lot of setup usually. It's very verbose, right? You have this dot game. Sorry. Was trying to think and type at the same time. Think about something totally different and type at the same time. Okay. So this is set up for the moment. Now if we go back to the karting game, and also this should all be pretty basic Java. You have your private modifier here for your field variables, and you're just saying this dot game equals game, you know, this helps get rid of the ambiguity of setting that would come with just setting game equals game. The compiler probably doesn't like that much. And this is all basic sort of Java stuff, object-oriented stuff that I feel like probably anyone watching this video should know. Like I said, just basic Java stuff. In any case, if we go back to this, we need to make a few more changes. First of all, we do not need this texture. We'll be using lots of textures, but we do not need the default libgdx one. So first, what is create? It's kind of like show in that it'll run before the render loop. We're just going to make the sprite badge. And what is the sprite badge? Well, the sprite badge is going to handle, in libgdx, it kind of handles rendering for you, right? So when we're drawing that image to the screen, all of the drawing is done in the sprite badge. So you have batch.begin, batch.end in your render loop every frame. This is running, and it's sort of, the batch is going to handle rendering everything. You can even do something like that if you really wanted to sort of separate it out and make it obvious. And the batch will draw a lot of things. There's like the batch has tons of methods we can use. We're going to use some of them. Yeah, not most of them. In any case, we do not need this because we don't want to draw anything. In fact, we don't actually need this either. We can actually just call super.render here. And we can cut this. This, by the way, this code just clears the screen. There's no need to worry about this. It is necessary to have in your render loop. However, it is not something that you have to stress over. It is simply something that clears the screen to black, or well, whatever color you set. Actually, currently it's red, but see if we change it to black there. Oh, whoops, we have to delegate to the screen first. But right now, if we run the game, I think nothing will come up. Yeah, it's just a black screen. Now, what is dispose? Well, dispose is really simple also. It is just a method that's going to dispose of your assets. So anything that can be disposed should be disposed. That way, as you're switching through screens and classes and things while your game is running, you're not having like memory leaks where things are not getting disposed and new instances of them are being created. This is, I'm sure this is giving somebody's OCD a mess there. Oh boy. I just deleted one of the things that I needed, right? Yep, I sure did. Okay, did not mean to delete game there. Okay. Anyways, so we don't want any memory leaks, so we're going to use our dispose, and it's that simple, really, right? All we're going to be doing is like batch.dispose, texture.dispose, whatever can be disposed, we're just going to get rid of it. And this will be called once the class is no longer needed, right? So at the end, we're going to always need this sprite batch all the way until our game is completely done with. So this won't be called until the very end, sort of after our game is closed and the player is no longer playing, right? In general, we only ever want one batch. We're not going to make a new one in each file. We are in fact going to pass that batch around to every screen or every class that needs it, which is why I had one going in our first screens sort of constructor. Private game screen. We need to make an instance of this screen. And then this is what I meant by the game delegating to screens. So the game has a set screen. Oh wait, whoops. We need to, of course, instantiate the instance. And then we're going to put this, the game class itself, and the batch. And they're both going to go in through the constructor, be set here, and then we can use them anywhere in the class, right? And then we're going to set screen. Set screen is a method that exists in the game class that we're inheriting from. So we can just call it sort of explicitly like this. And we're going to set the screen to game screen. You can set it to anything that extends screen. Implement screen or extend screen adapter, all that good stuff. And then when we run the game, no magic happens. We still just have a black screen because we're clearing to black. If we put it back to this, you can see that we will be clearing to red. That'd be a fun game in itself, right? You can make button presses, just change what you're clearing to. In case I like clearing the black, it's just personal preference. Cool, so we have our first thing set up here, and we're also, before I end this video, just going to make a couple private static final int game, whoops, caps lock, game height, and that's going to be 256 private. Sorry, I'm wrong. You're probably wondering why that's such a small number, right? I'm going to explain in just a minute before the video ends. Static final int. I assume you know what static and final all that means. This variable is never going to change. It's final. It's also going to be accessed outside of this class, and this is 256. This is meant to be width, of course, which would make sense. Okay, so why are we having these weird numbers as our game width and height? Well, this was the resolution of the Super Nintendo. So the Super Nintendo, a lot of the games in it ran on a 256 by 224 resolution. Very boxy resolution compared to what games run on nowadays. But we're really trying to recreate the look of it, right? So we're going to go with something like this for the game width and height. And you'll see as we go on, these numbers are even more significant because they're going to represent pixels on the screen, and we're going to have a little bit of fun with that. In any case, I'm going to try to cap these videos around 17 to 20 minutes. We're coming up on 17 minutes now. But I promise in the next video, we are going to have something on the screen. We're going to be projecting some images. I have some assets here ready to go. This is my track. It's my little 2D pixel art track here. I just got some assets off OpenGameArt.org or whatever it is. OpenGameArt.org. I think I got a tile set off of here, and then I just made it into this track. I also made my own little player. Why it's there it is. My own little player based on a Mario Kart image of Bowser. Obviously, my guy doesn't have horns and stuff. And we'll be using this and we'll be putting him in the world a little bit later. It'll be kind of fun. But next video, we'll be projecting this track, hopefully, and it's gonna be kind of fun. So I will see you then. By the way, if anything was confusing or if you had some problems with the clips or something like that, feel free to ask me questions in the comments. You know, if you want to comment on anything else too, I'll go ahead. If you thought that my explanation wasn't sufficient or something like that, just let me know and I'll be around. And see you next time.